Welcome to PD Insider. I'm Craig Miller of the Practising Law Institute. This program is part of a series for the PD community to share insights about professional development and the law. Joining me today are Deepa Selvam and Josh Rosenzweig of Morgan Lewis. Deepa is the Director of Professional Development in charge of training for non-partner attorneys throughout the firm and across practice groups. Currently, she's board chair of the PDC, the Professional Development Consortium. Josh is Senior Director of AI and Innovation. He's responsible for crafting and implementing the firm's AI strategy and embracing and integrating emerging technologies. The focus of today's conversation is artificial intelligence and professional development. It's been about 2 years since ChatGPT launched in late 2022 and rocked the world, including the legal profession. You may recall the famous, or now slightly infamous, assessment by Goldman Sachs in March of 23 that 44% of legal work could be replaced by generative AI. Gartner Consulting, in a report issued in June, states that the investment in AI, particularly generative AI, has reached a new high, but is yet to deliver its anticipated business value. They also note, to use their terms, that the peak of inflated expectations is past, and the slope of enlightenment is within 2 to 5 years. Each of us has seen clear and powerful examples of how AI can be an amazing productivity tool. For legal professional development, technology, knowledge management, and the professionals and innovators they partner with, it's time to move forward with the firm's adoption so it can benefit from the significant investment that's being made. So what are the conditions required to move forward? Josh, can you give us a view from the inside, a brief overview of the state of AI in the legal industry today, and how has it evolved over the past year or so?
So I think the hype was real, a year and a half, 2 years ago, and we saw a rush of firms and professionals within the legal industry trying to access these tools and have a way of benefiting from what was believed to be those opportunities to see efficiencies and gains. And I think what we're seeing now is that adoption is tough to manage with any technology project. And with the complexity that comes with generative AI, it's going to require us to harmonize the way that technology works with how our attorneys are working. So we've seen that a shift has happened from just adopting and implementing these tools into the practice to thinking about how we're educating attorneys across the firm on governance models and what our clients' expectations are and how they're actually using those tools in day-to-day practice.
Education and governance are key. Let's focus on training, the purpose of which would be to drive adoption and safe use of the tools. How have you organized for that? Deepa, you want to begin?
Yeah, of course. So, we're seeing firms across the board really do this in a variety of ways. Some firms are certainly relying on outside consultants and vendors to shore up their AI training, and others are doing things in-house. And I imagine that many of them, like us, are really taking a multi-pronged approach to the training. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But what I love about our training approach is that it really is very intentional in terms of the substance and the content, but also training modality, kind of stakeholder involvement and timing. When are we getting out in front of certain groups? So we are really focusing on a holistic approach to our training around Gen AI.
I'm sure we'd agree that individuals need clear rules so that they know how to use it. They know the rules of the road, in effect, and also they have comfort and confidence in their ability to use and execute with the tool.
And we're approaching that on a kind of 3-tiered basis. So we're thinking about just firm-wide, how do we make AI education more accessible to everyone in the firm? So foundationally creating a framework for our personnel across the firm to be able to learn more about what is happening in the AI space, the new advancements within generative AI, and just general terminology that's being used and thrown around across the industry so that they have a framework and a basis to use when talking internally about these tools as well as with clients. We're also thinking about it on a role-based level. So with associates, with partners at different levels and stages of their careers, how are we educating them on that governance approach? And I think one of the things that Deepa and I have spent a lot of time doing is making sure that we're not just talking to partners about client preferences and requirements around AI, that we're actually educating our associates who are learning those tools and those skills as they're moving up in their careers and understanding what the do's and don'ts of AI are going to be at a client level, so that they have that knowledge when they're using these tools and can use them in an efficient way and using them in the way in which they are intended to be used. And then I think finally at the tool level, we're making sure that when we launch new tools into the firm, we're not just releasing them and asking people to play around with those tools. When they're using these tools, they understand what they can and cannot do with the tool, what the capabilities are, what the capabilities are not. So, and we're seeing that there are many tools that are out there that are designed for very specific use cases, and the sort of enterprise level tools may not be necessary or adapting to a particular practice they may be interested in leveraging this technology.
So if I could just sort of summarize, there's kind of the firm-wide approach, which has to do with awareness and understanding. Then there's the job-specific approach that you guys have been taking, and then kind of the tool-specific approach. So really a three-pronged structure. So I think that sounds really smart and an interesting way to proceed. Let's talk a little bit about use cases, for AI. Some are obvious and, have been out there for a while, like drafting. I think, everyone tries to do a first draft of something in the AI tool. Summarization of documents and meetings. Legal research is obviously a popular one. In fact, I've seen studies that say that legal research still remains the number one use case in the legal industry. But then there are more complex ones, like due diligence and analyzing vast quantities of data, which seem to be getting the most attention now in your firm and in your training processes.
So we've seen that the use cases that enable our attorneys to be more creative in solving particular client problems that they may be facing are opportunities that we find to be the most successful over the next 2 to 5 years. You mentioned legal research continues to be a strong use case, and one of the things that we've been incorporating into our training mechanisms is using that as the entry point for how our attorneys are leveraging generative AI. And then from that, being able to introduce other types of tools where they can brainstorm on other use cases that they see could be valuable within their practice. I think one of the opportunities that present themselves for attorneys is actually going through that use case development. So identifying a problem, coming up with a potential solution to that problem, and then working with our teams within AI and innovation to identify what type of tools or technologies are best suited for solving those types of problems.
Let me ask you, before you sort of allow someone to get their hands on the tool, so to speak, what kind of process do they have to go through? And do you need to have some assurance that they can use the tool correctly before they do it? And does that depend on maybe the type of work that they actually intend to do with the tool?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the type of tool and the type of work that they're doing. So again, with generative AI assisted research, attorneys have had a lot of training on how to use those tools. And in those situations, a lot of those vendors are just adding additional functionality to the tool. So it's just training them on understanding what the expectation is of the results that are coming back and making sure they understand, that they still need to have that attorney in the loop of reviewing that material before it gets incorporated into any client work. When we think about, sort of straight generative AI tools and incorporating that into the Matter workflow, one of the things that we have been working on is a credentialing program for those types of tools. Some of those tools may be available to the entire firm. Some of them may be practice specific that require even more in-depth credentialing. But I think it's important for us that the users of those tools understand, again, what the capabilities are, what those capabilities are not, how to use them safely. And then underlying all of that is still going back to the governance piece, which is attorneys are working on various client matters, and clients have varying preferences on use cases for AI, what types of data they allow or do not allow in the procurement of those solutions and how those tools are being used. And so we're educating both on the tool and how attorneys should be using those tools with the clients that they're working on.
Well, sounds great. But also the credentialing program must provide some assurance to the client in terms of how the information is being used and how the answers are being developed.
Yes, and in some cases we're running boot camps for individual client teams, especially if we're taking those tools and shining a light on a particular type of process within the client work that we're doing. So we're bringing in attorneys, associates, partners that are working on those clients and that work, training them on the use of the tool and how that tool is incorporated directly into that type of work.
All right, that sounds like it would be very reassuring to those involved. Let's talk about some of the roles and responsibilities involved in the rollout and the training for AI, and how do you use a cross-functional team?
Yeah. So I think, this is kind of where it comes back to the intentionality about our approach to the education on Gen AI. And I think a perfect example of this is when, Josh and his team were figuring out and developing what is this Gen AI education plan, education matrix we're going to look like. He came to the talent and PD side of the house to really partner with us. And certainly, in my role, I am not a Gen AI expert. I am far from it, actually. I'm definitely taking advantage of all of the training that Josh and his team are putting out there. But, on the PD side of the house, we know training and development. And we know how the firm is set up in terms of what kind of training is going to work, what systems we have. And we already have this existing, really robust infrastructure that we can use to really leverage all of the AI work that Josh and his team are doing to, one, scale it across the board, but two, to get it in front of the right groups at the right time. So it has been, I think, a really meaningful collaboration. And I think it also, it informs the training approach that we take. So, our kind of overall training and development philosophy has, of course, always included a general kind of traditional training component, but we also really focus heavily on experiential, practical, on-your-feet training opportunities. And we knew that when it comes to the Gen AI training, that was something that was going to be really important to incorporate as well. So
what I'm hearing really is the importance of partnership.
Absolutely.
And knowing your audience
Mm-hmm.
is key too, in order to make the training effective. And of course, you, in your role, I'm sure, are familiar with, learning theory and other pedagogical approaches that can help make it digestible and meaningful to the lawyers and others. Josh, how do you involve yourself in the actual training and rollout?
So I think one of the big pieces, again, of our collaboration with Deepa's team has not just been the setup of the education structure, but actually getting advice from them on rollout. So as we start thinking about rolling out tools to various levels of the firm, getting guidance from them of their experience of working with attorneys across the firm and understanding where we have opportunities to introduce these tools. Should they be done at a practice group level? Should they be done at a role level? And getting their input and guidance on what they have seen in the past of what has been successful and maybe what hasn't been successful, and incorporating that into our rollout plan to make sure that, again, these tools are rolled out in an efficient way, but also that we have incorporated the training and governance aspect as we're doing that rollout. So these things have to happen in parallel, and it requires efforts across multiple teams to do that.
Mm-hmm. Could you give some examples of some of the governance rules, some of the things that you've established?
Sure. So I think the biggest one has been just around client consent. So as a law firm, we are in possession of client data, client documents, and it can be challenging when there are tools that we've purchased previously that are now incorporating generative AI functionality, and a lot of times attorneys may not be aware that they're using that functionality. So it's systematically sending out updates and notifications to the firm around changes that are happening in tools and making sure that users are aware of those when they're leveraging them for the delivery of legal service. In addition to that, we have clients, again, that are on a broad spectrum of adoption of AI. Some have made it very clear to us that they want us using generative AI in their work. Others that have said that they want to make sure they're involved in that process. So we spend a lot of time reviewing outside counsel guidelines, being in conversations with clients, and creating a matrix of where clients sit within that AI spectrum, so that when we do have opportunities to introduce a new tool, we're sharing that information with the attorneys across the firm, from partners to associates, for them to understand, if they are working on a particular client, what they can or cannot do with that client and with different tools and use cases.
Yeah, so that's really important, obviously. And so how do you get that message out there about what they can do and whom they can do it for?
So I think we're doing that in a variety of different levels. So when we have been working with Deepa's team on in-person workshops when we're introducing new tools and describing how those tools can be used, and it's underpinned multiple times about the use cases and making sure that they're aware of how those tools can be used. We're also proactively talking to client teams when we know that there may be a particular challenge of using generative AI on that client's work, that those timekeepers understand exactly what the rules of engagement are with AI and that particular client.
Okay, and it is a wide spectrum, you say?
A very wide spectrum. And it changes frequently because, again, the space is changing so rapidly. New tools, new models are coming out, and new information about how those models seems to trickle in on a pretty frequent basis. And so we're always having to update that guidance. And it's an important communication tool that we do need to partner with, groups across the firm, but more in particular with Deepa's team, to make sure that everyone is aware of what those rules are and how they are changing.
Just in terms of the in-person workshops and getting this information in front of people, we have an Associate Academy series, and we bring together associates at particular times in their career, really critical times in their career. Let's say a mid-level Associate Academy. It's that chance for associates to get together for 2.5, 3 days of professional development and training, and certainly also there's a relationship component of that. But those academies have provided a really fantastic venue for some of this AI training, right? Not just the general messaging about governance and expectations and all of the ethical and client considerations, but also the opportunity for folks to kind of get into it with the tools. So going back to what I said before about really focusing on the experiential piece, that practical on your feet training opportunity. You can teach people, about the concepts. You can, share a lot of knowledge about how these tools work, and certainly that's an incredibly important component. But having people actually experience that and get in there, play with the tools, see how they work, have an opportunity to engage with Josh and his team in person as they're kind of going through this together, that takes that training to the next level. Mm-hmm. So just wanted to kind of highlight those opportunities, because I think we've done we've been really intentional about making space within all of those academies over the past year, and of course going forward for AI training.
So that's great. So you've been able to integrate the AI training into some of the normal operating and training mechanisms of the firm.
Exactly.
And hopefully that makes it sort of less of a mysterious thing out there, as it becomes more normalized within their workflow and their workdays. Ultimately, the firms have made big investments, yours and others, in AI, generative AI particularly. What benefits does a law firm expect to achieve from AI, and also what benefits do the clients expect? How do they think they'll be better off with the law firm having made these investments?
I think it's hard to say at this point. We are still in a phase where everyone, even outside of legal, is trying to understand what the ultimate benefit of generative AI is. And if you think back to the introduction of the internet and where that has taken us, I think we're on a similar path with generative AI. Mm-hmm. The challenge we have right now is the expectations are so high that there is going to be an easy button that is going to solve every problem. Right. And what we have been trying to do as part of our education is make sure that there is that foundational knowledge across the firm about what AI is, what it is not, and provide opportunities for our entire firm to experiment with where this is going. And we need the entire firm to help us in doing that, because there are opportunities on the legal side, there are opportunities on the operations side, and to your point, there are opportunities in how we're collaborating with clients and making sure that, again, with clients that are at different sort of maturity of their own AI journey, that we can match that, knowing the kind of broad depth of our client portfolio.
Right, and I understand you can help educate the clients too,
Yes, and we've had clients, especially in-house legal departments, that are dealing with these same challenges, and it's been a great opportunity to collaborate with them on the experimentation that we've done within our firm, the experimentation that they are doing within their own legal departments, and sharing information. I think at this stage, that's the biggest thing that we can do with clients and with our own internal practice groups and departments is share those experiences and those experiments, because the more we learn about this technology, I think the better off we will be in understanding what the ultimate benefit is going to be.
In your experience, it's not a horse race, but who do you think is more of a driver? Is it from the corporate side, the client side, or is it from the law firm side?
I've actually seen that it's more from the attorney side, which has been a shift for other types of technological advancements. I think in the past, adoption has been slow because individuals in my role have been trying to push out technology and make it more accessible to the attorney population. In this situation, attorneys they've had access to it through ChatGPT. It's been more accessible. They do, in a general sense, understand how the technology can be a benefit. And so what we've had to do is make sure that we're doing it in a thoughtful way of introducing these tools across the firm and trying to layer in that governance and education, because if we don't do that, then there's the potential that these tools can just be used in a wide variety of ways, and we don't have that control, and they may not be used in the most beneficial way possible.